you yet to see what you wanted to talk about, but we are all ears. And then afterwards, we might have Mary hop on. Last time she sort of grilled us, and it, was eye-opener for some of us, as to how well we were able to respond. But we're going to get going. Christy, you want to open us up in prayer?
I will. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Father God, we are grateful people. We thank you, Father, for this time together, and we thank you for Annette. And we just pray that our time together with her would be one that really reflects back on the process of qualifying exams, Father, and just gives you glory. And so as we are attentive and mindful, Father God, help us to refocus our busyness in our world and work and all the things, family, and all the things that just take lots of our energy, and help us to focus in on you. Help us to focus in on the qualifying exams ahead. Help us to find peace and also motivation in this process. In Jesus' name we pray. And everyone says,
Amen.
Amen.
And we are 4 weeks out from Thursday, you guys.
Woo woo.
Like, are you getting nervous?
I think I'm at the point where it's like, I'm just ready for it to be over with. I'm so tired of thinking about this stupid test. I'm like, can we be done already?
Yeah.
But
yeah, there definitely comes a point where you kind of hit a wall and you're just sort of kind of like, I just want to be done already.
Yeah.
So I know you guys want to get in some studying, so I won't be too long. So a couple of things that I found really, really worked for me. I went and I pulled out my old quals folder. So this was my quals folder, and I had all these are little books, basically. They're in like spirals. You can get them at CVS. And I had one for each subject, and they're really great because they fit in your purse. So I work at 3 different schools, and I have 2 small kids, so I did not have the time to dedicate, full 8-hour days, 10-hour days. I know some of my cohorts did. I thought that was fantastic. I just didn't have that time. So what I liked about this was if I felt I was weak in academic writing, or if I thought I was weak in theory, I would just toss one of these in my purse. And then if I was, I went skiing 2 weeks before I took the test, and I was literally on the ski lift going through my notes. When I took my daughter shopping for her father-daughter dance, she was trying on dresses, and I was flipping through my cards studying. So I had to squeeze it in wherever I could. And I found that that was sort of one of the best things for me, just because I didn't have the time. If I could advise you on anything, it would be take this tests you can, especially the second day, the electives. Just a little secret that they don't tell you, a lot of those questions are repeat questions. So what I did was I took every practice test I possibly could. By the time I took the test, I had about 35 practice tests. So when I got the question, and I took all those practice tests at least 2 or 3 times. So when I was in the writtens on the second day and I got that question, I had written an answer to that question already. And not only had I written it once, I written it about 3 times. So I was able to answer that question in about a half an hour because I knew what I wanted to say because I practiced writing it. So if I could offer you one steady piece of advice, it's take as many practice tests as you can and take them over and over and over because they will repeat questions. They won't repeat questions on the core courses, but they do on the electives. I don't know if you guys heard what happened to me 2 days before I was supposed to take my tests. So I was supposed to take the written in Manhattan on a Thursday, and Monday night they put a weather alert out. There was going to be a blizzard. So Tuesday and Wednesday I was watching the weather, and it just kept growing, like 3 to 6 inches, 6 to 9 inches. Now, I know some of you guys may live in areas where you're used to 12 to 18 inches. In Manhattan, that's a lot of snow. So everything on Thursday was completely closed. The whole city was shut down. All the subways were closed. Wednesday afternoon at probably around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I got in my car and I drove to Regent. I had no plans of taking the test there. I was planning here. I had spoken to all my previous professors at Pace University, where I did my undergrad and my grad degree. I had it all worked out. I had it in my head how that day was going to go. I'm sure Mary has talked to you about that. Visualization, visualize yourself walking into the test, taking the test, you know, where you're going to sit. All of that went out the window with me, because I wound up down at Regent, which was great, but it just completely threw my whole plans. So plans are good, but they're not guaranteed. Sometimes things happen and you got to kind of change that. So taking the tests, I found in the first 4 hours, the morning of day one, I was really, really nervous. Like my adrenaline was just going, and it was really hard to come down off of that. And it was really hard to think. I think I called Mary during the lunch hour on day one, and I sort of went into a panic. And you know, it's a natural thing. You're gonna panic a little bit. But it was nice, because I did have friends like Mary and some of the other people I took the test with, Alani and Philip, and we all kind of reassured each other. So certainly use the group that you guys have, call each other on the lunch hour to kind of make yourselves come down a little bit, because your adrenaline's gonna get going. One of the hardest nights for me was the night in between the 2 written exams, because it's very, very difficult to let go of day one and prepare for day 2. I thought, anyways. You know, what keeps going through your head is what you should have done and what you didn't do and who you didn't mention, and you're eating dinner and you're getting ready for bed and you're going over in your head all the things that would have been a better option for you. And I thought that was very, very difficult to let go. Again, use your sources, use your Regent sources. All of us, I had, you know, Dean, I didn't take the test with Dean. I didn't take the test with John Powers. I didn't take the test with Rich Shuda. I texted all of them. I called all of them. So use everybody that you know. I think I even sent my work to Mary and Rich and John, and they read it, and they sort of reassured me that some of the example, yes, I had gaps, but it wasn't as bad as I was making it out to seem. Day 2 was great, my written experience, because like I said, those were all repeat questions. Every single one of them was a repeat question. So take as many practice tests as you possibly can, because there's a very, very good chance you will see the same questions that you've seen. And they don't tell you that, but that's something that that I learned, and I was much more confident on day 2. What I did to prep between writtens and orals, I looked at where I thought that my gaps were, and I collected new research. I literally started looking at new journal articles, what had come out in the news the last couple days, and I tried to find ways with the most recent research to fill those gaps. And I know a lot of people have probably spoken to you and they've said, you know what you know by the time you walk into that test, or a week before, you're not going to remember anything. I kind of disagree with that, because I was looking up facts the morning of my writtens and the morning of my oral exams. And I was using those examples when I went into written and when I went into orals. So for me, that wasn't the case. You know, a lot of people told me, oh, don't worry about 2 weeks before the exam. You know what you know. I disagree. I think there's great stuff, and there's more recent stuff that comes out every day. And that was one of the things that Fraser noted in my orals. You know, he said, I really appreciate that you integrated some very recent examples from even yesterday. You know, I brought up something that was in the news in my oral exams from the day before, and they appreciated that. And I even cited an article that was just published 3 days before the orals, and they appreciated that. So don't be afraid to integrate. You know, you're not going to memorize thousands of pages, but don't be afraid to memorize a couple facts, right? You know, a couple days before you go in, and use that. I think that they appreciated that. One of the things I really came down on myself for was history of comm, because I left off Wu and who's the other one? Ong. left off woo and ong. I was hysterical. I spent 2 weeks in an absolute panic thinking, oh, this is it. I'm going to fail. You know, I know I had to use all the sources. I didn't use it. So I went in there with a prepared speech. So Keeler was basically like, all right, we're going to move on to history. And I was like, all right, well, you know, let me just say before you begin, here's where I would have integrated woo, and here's where I would have integrated ong, and this is what I think. And he holds his hands up and he's like, Annette, I don't care that you left off woo. He's like, it's okay. He's like, just explain it to me. You know, what would you do? So if you leave somebody off, don't panic. I went into an absolute panic thinking I didn't have woo and I didn't have ong and that's it and I failed. Keeler didn't care. Didn't care one bit. And then I tried to bring ong up and he's like, yeah, whatever, let's move on. He didn't even care. He didn't want to hear what I had to say about ong. So you know, don't let one or two small things that you leave off throw you. And they really are fantastic in the orals. And if you don't know the answer, it's kind of like it becomes like a Jeopardy game. Brown was like, well, let's think of that. If it's not reason, it must be like, you know what I mean? It's almost, they almost sort of try to help lead you to that answer if you don't know it. And once you say it, and then I was like, oh, imagination. And I was like, all right, let's talk imagination. So then I kind of rattled off what I knew. I noticed that you guys put up in one of the Facebook pages, the worst place you can be is your own head. Completely agree with that. I think I panicked more than I needed to. And that was a huge weakness of mine. And one of the best things that happened to me was I panicked so much on day one, and I panicked through the night of day one into day two that I couldn't sleep. And it almost worked in my favor for day two because I was so tired that I just physically couldn't drum up that adrenaline rush. So that was my, and then like everybody said, you know, if you did well, you'll be done at 1:30, you'll be done very, very early. And that certainly was the case. We kind of blew through most of the cores relatively quickly. And then a lot of it is, you know, kind of a game in the orals. You know, they sit there and they get into a debate and I forget what we were talking about. I think it was Harry Potter pajamas and whether or not we could sell Harry Potter pajamas. And that had nothing to do with what I wrote, but we were talking about branding and marketing in my PR classes. And we had a big debate over Harry Potter pajamas. And it's sort of like this game that they play with you to fill time. I'm sorry?
The audio just got really weird for a second, but I think it's better.
Oh. Okay, sorry.
Demon-esque of sorts. Hey, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so thinking back about the kinds of questions they asked you about your defense. So you said, you know, what kinds of questions came up after you've done these written that you didn't expect? What was surprising?
Sure. So they will pick out stuff in your orals and they will try to get you to go further into it. So for instance, I think I brought up something, I wrote something on the narrative paradigm theory, and Brown was like, you know, do you know all the tenets of the narrative paradigm theory? And, you know, no, I did not. You know, I could define it. I could, you know, say whose theory it was. And that was the extent of my knowledge of it. And I was sitting there thinking, and I'm like, you know, I could try to throw something, but I don't think that it's going to work. And I said to him, I said, you know, Dr. Brown, I'm very sorry. I can't, I don't know them. And he said, all right, that's okay. And then he went into probably this 10-minute discussion over the narrative paradigm theory. If you genuinely don't know something, tell them that you don't know, because I think they appreciate humility rather than, you know, arrogance, and to come in there and say, oh yeah, I know it, and to sort of try to throw something off the top of your head that doesn't make sense. I didn't find that they went off on a tangent and asked me about stuff that wasn't on the paper. They grilled me about things that were on the paper. And Fraser was sort of in this, we all kind of got the same questions from Fraser. He was kind of in this mood where he would say, okay, unpack that for me. And one of the things that I did with things like theory, I went and I looked up more information on each theory because I knew that was going to happen. So I knew the theories that I stated because I had my writtens. I knew the theories that I wrote about. And then I went and I found 2 or 3 more examples or facts on each of them. And I memorized them for the orals. And thank God that I did, because that was a big point in theory. They will ask you to expand on it. And if all you can offer is what you wrote, I mean, you know, it's one thing, 1 or 2 theories, but if you can't offer anything else on the theories, then what you wrote down, you may have a harder time in that oral exam. The more information that you can give them that's not necessarily on the paper, the better. So like I said, that week in between, I was doing a lot of research. You know, a lot of people told me that's the time to kind of, you know, come down a little bit and just review your notes. I didn't take that as a time to review anything. I took that as a time to do more research. And I was looking up more examples. I was looking up more studies, and I was building on what I wrote, because you can't do, if you didn't write it, it's not there. So they're not going to ask you, at least in my opinion. So I found research to build on what I put down. And thank God I did, because everything they asked me, they said, you know, unpack this for us, or build on that for me, or what did you mean by this? Give us another example.
I have a question.
Sure.
2 things. First, in your spiral flashcards, like,
Yep.
can you go through maybe the kinds of things that you condense down into that? And then second, as far as like giving yourself a practice test, did you just go and pull previous questions from the Dropbox and then sit down and like time yourself and write it out? Or did you take the time to like really formulate a good answer with your notes? So yeah, how about those 2 things?
That's a good question. Yeah, no. So all the practice tests I did in the 2-hour time period. Because I mean, if you sat there and thought about it, I mean, you could be there for a day for all, you know, 30 different practice questions. So I found the best way for me was I didn't even look at the question. I just kind of randomly did one of these and pointed to my screen. And that was the one that I ended up taking. And like I said, I did each practice test probably 2 or 3 times, and I did them in the 2-hour time period. Some of them I had friends of mine read. I had John Powers read it. I had Rich Shuda read it. I had Mary read some of them. Now, some of you are probably getting tested on your dissertation. I was tested on my dissertation as well. As you guys probably know, there is no question or no practice question. So I had Mary and Rich Shuda write me some practice questions, because well, Rich didn't, but Mary had been through the test. Rich had seen, you know, how some of the questions are formulated, and they knew what my dissertation is on. It's on, you know, performing artists and the desire for fame. And they basically wrote a couple practice questions for me. And again, I used everything I put in those practice questions. I just tailored it to the question. And it was almost, I don't know if Keeler and Mary, like, I don't know if Keeler told Mary or something, but Mary was spot on with her question, because it was almost to a T. In terms of what I wrote in these spiral notebooks. So this one is theory. Basically, let me see if I can find a better example. So when I went through, all right, so on page 1, or one of the pages, it says discuss 2 theories in the cybernetic tradition. And then on this page, on the next page, it was literally 2 theories in the cybernetic tradition. In this case, it was spiral of silence. Spiral of silence. I have who wrote it. I have a definition of it. I have an additional journal on it. So I cited another journal who used this theory to apply it to their work. I also found criticisms, and I put those criticisms into my paper. And Fraser, you know, appreciated that even if he didn't ask me for what are some of the problems with the theories, what are some of the criticisms, I still listed that. So for every single theory, I had the definition of it. I had the writer or the authors of it. I had how it was used in an in an academic journal. I applied it to kind of an everyday thing. I think in this case, it was something about the media, something that was going on at the media at the time. And then I had criticisms on it.
Where did you find your criticisms?
So if you look, well, you can Google problems with certain theories, and certain, just Google will come up. Also, if you're going through journal articles that used the theory, like in my case, I used Nerwith, and he, in the end of a journal article, it lists limitations. A lot of times in the limitations section, it'll talk about the limitations of the theory. So I would integrate those limitations that I found in those journals, and I would put them as criticisms, because they were criticisms for that writer. So they're still criticisms of the theory. He didn't say, give us criticisms that every single person found. He just said, give me a couple critiques. So I found the limitations to be the most useful for finding criticisms. A lot of this stuff was built off of the textbooks. So what I did first was, and I know you guys are kind of like really into studying, you only have a few weeks left, so I don't know how helpful this is, but what I did first was I sort of went through a lot of the texts, and I started formulating questions from the texts. So for instance, one question here was, what was Chesterton's argument on fairy tales? And then I sort of discussed Chesterton's whole argument on fairy tales on the next page. So I found things that I liked in the text, and I put them into question format, and I put them on all of these index cards. And it wasn't like I was just, memorizing information. I was literally asking myself questions, kind of like studying. If you ever took a language in high school, or you ever studied for social studies, you sort of put questions on your index cards and you flipped it over and there was the answer. So even though the information never came in a question format, I put it in a question format. So some of these questions: what was Craddock's central question? What theologian did Craddock hold the highest? How does Craddock explain why some struggle to listen and read the gospel? And I basically answered those questions. They were never questions that I had. They were never questions that were in the textbook. They were questions I formed from the textbook. And then once I had memorized all of these books, I used these books to write the practice tests. So you guys are at a good point right now where you can, or you should be taking practice tests. I didn't start with practice tests. I started with the text, and I turned all of the text into questions. And then once I memorized what I could in all of these different books, then I brought this into the practice tests.
Good answer.
Okay.
Helpful.
That's good. Yeah.
So the first question was, are you getting nervous? And the answer then was no, but now is yes.
Yeah.
So my in 28 minutes, I've gone from neutral to fanatical.
So
I think that happens every Monday night.
I was feeling so good, and now I'm feeling not so good. So,
Yeah.
but no, that's such help. I mean, so helpful, really. All of that.
Okay. I mean,
especially, some of the things we haven't heard. I mean, after you hear several, but some of the things that we haven't heard is, how you visualize getting in the room, and I hadn't heard that, and then, but also just the preparation. I mean, you're pretty pragmatic, I think, or systematic about your preparation. I think that is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. And do you guys,
as much as I've tried to do that. But
do any of you guys teach at all?
I teach at ORU in Tulsa. Oral Roberts
so one
University.
of the found was I would almost use my teaching classes as practice. And it almost got to the point where they were like, what does this have to do with anything? I'd be like, you need to hear it. Someday you're going to take media, in the church. Just listen. I would try to find ways to integrate as much information as I could into my courses. Even if they had never done an assignment on Fang before, I didn't care. I did a whole lesson on Fang's 6 revolutions. And they were like, no, we didn't really discuss that. One person took the class with me the previous semester. He's like, we didn't learn this. I'm like, that's okay. It's new stuff. So finding ways to kind of integrate the information wherever you can. I think we had a big debate at like Christmas dinner over something with social media. And I started, spitting out like Ong and Postman. I'm like, well, wait a minute now.
Yeah.
So every opportunity you can to sort of rehearse it as if it were a speech. And that was one of the things that I did. Once I took all the practice tests, I printed them out. And I literally would walk around my room or my living room or on my way to work. I recorded them on an app, and I would actually listen to them. If I was cooking dinner, it's hard to read and study. So I would listen to the app that I recorded the practice tests on. If I was in the shower, I listened to the app. A couple nights I fell asleep listening to my own recordings, but my recordings were the practice tests. So I didn't record all the information that I had written down because I had books upon books, but I had the practice tests. And like I said, when I got the repeat questions on day two was all repeats. I could just spit that information out, and I was pretty much done early.
So for day one questions that were different, I mean, do you still feel like you were able to really integrate the answers you had developed on your practice test into those questions?
I did, yes. And now I have a different opinion on it, but at the time I thought that I blew it. I mean, I was like, this was not what I was expecting. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to answer this question with the information that I have. And I really just tried to, the first history was the first question I took. It was all over the place. It made no sense in terms of like grammatical errors, spelling. And I just didn't plan anything out. I was just typing. And it got to a point where I like 2 hours into it, I actually erased a couple paragraphs. And I was like, I can't do this for 16 hours. So the next test that I took 2 minutes before, and I had a piece of paper, and I just bulleted 4 or 5 points that I wanted to discuss. And then I was able to fill in the information because most of that information was from the practice test that I had taken. And then I didn't do the data dumping. I know a lot of people talk to you about that. I'm not very good at just throwing the information and then building the question into it. What I found was I needed to plan out the question. And I took those 2 minutes and I said, okay, here are the 4 or 5 main points that I want to talk about. And those 4 or 5 main points I knew because I had done them in the practice test. But I actually built the question and wrote it all as one. I didn't do the data dumps.
Okay.
Good answers.
Yeah, that's great. I've been working some on flashcards, and here, like this week, I've been doing a lot of putting essays together and putting all the information together. And I'm like, I really feel like I just need to tape everything on my walls, like in almost like one word or very short sentence form, so I can look at it and go, okay, Craddock, and then start rattling stuff off. But maybe, that type of index card booklet might keep my house from looking so crazy.
Yeah, that was what I liked about this, was it was all together. So this was academic, right? This was history, and I had probably 2 or 3 for history, but you could toss them in your purse, toss them in your briefcase, and then I just kind of went through them. I wrote things out on pieces of paper, and I had them all over the house. I had them above my window when I was cooking. I had them on the glass door on my shower. They were absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
I found that helped too, just kind of having random reminders.
So I'm going to pay you $20 so you can mail me all of your index card things, and then I'll use them for a couple of days, and then I'll send them to someone else, and they can send them to someone else. And
there you go. We'll start a business.
Business plan.
There you go.
You can't sell Harry Potter pajamas, but you could sell those index cards.
Yeah, I know. I was like, where are all of the Spark Notes cheat sheets for quals? It's like, come on now. We need to develop one.
I mean, again, a lot of it was just questions I formed off of the textbooks. If I saw something interesting in the textbook, I would just put it. I'd make it a question. So one of the questions here was discuss research on the desire for fame. That's not necessarily something that was in the book. That was a collection of different articles that I had put together that I used for my dissertation. So a lot of the questions I didn't necessarily find somewhere. I formulated the question based on what I had read. And then I sort of summarized the points that I wanted to in the next page. And then I used that to integrate into the practice test.
Yeah. Okay. Good deal.
Very helpful.
So okay. I hope that's
Really
true.
helpful.
And you guys are just being polite. I mean, I just tried to share my experience. I would say, you know, don't think that you know what you know a week or two in advance. I actually used, I found something the morning of on an image on a refugee, and I used that in my written exams. And again, they appreciated that. Use all your Regent sources. We will all be saying prayers for you, texting you guys. I got a ton of texts, Dean, John, Christine. So that was really, really helpful to have that supportive network, and don't panic during the orals, and build on what you wrote in between the writtens and the oral exams, because I didn't get asked random questions. I got asked about what I wrote. I went in there to defend what I wrote, and you have to be able to say, yes, I agree with this theory because, and you can't just spit out what you wrote in the writtens. You have to add to it. So that week in between is your time for more research and more memorization with more pressure because you have a smaller time frame to do it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, panic.
Don't panic. Honestly, it's not nearly as bad. I like yelled at I called Mary in a panic in between, and I wouldn't let her get a word in edgewise, and and it really wasn't as bad as I thought. And even Fraser and Brown and Keeler and Perry, when I walked in, they were like, this you did well, but we need to discuss it here.
Okay.
And they do try to reassure you, and if you don't know something, they will try to lead you to that answer. And if you genuinely don't know, tell them the truth. Tell them you don't know.
One of the questions was on your dissertation research.
It was.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And so did you recall the theories that you were using to build that case? Because I think probably part of that is going to be mine.
It was. Yeah. So I think I did use some theories, but I think the bigger question was on the latest research. The question was really tailored to, it was like, if you were going to build a case study, whose research would you use or something, and why?
Oh, okay.
So I knew a lot of the research on my dissertation, because at that point I was doing dissertation research credit.
Mm-hmm.
So I memorized a lot of that information. And then I didn't spit out my dissertation per se. I kind of did a derivative of my dissertation. It was more quantitative. My dissertation is actually qualitative, but I sort of did it as a quantitative study and changed some things around. And I thought he was going to, ding me on that and be like, you just more or less did your dissertation in a quantitative format. But he was like, all right, it works.
Good.
So it's not really as scary or as frightening as you think. And you guys will be fine. You have all of us, you will be fine. Don't panic. Cause I panicked and it was like it was terrible. Didn't sleep the night in between day 1 and 2. But use your sources, use your Regent sources. And remember, they really do want you to do well, and you guys will do fine.
Good.
It sounds like you're working hard, so you'll be fine.
Awesome. Thank you, Annette.
You're welcome. All right. I don't want to, I know you guys are busy and you want to get to work, so I'll let you guys study. But we're praying for you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Our best on your dissertation research.
Thank you.
Keep
I'm
pulling
sort of
that wagon
hitting a wall.
uphill. The little train that could. The little train that could.
Quite frank, I did interview number 29 today, and I'm just like, oh God. Kayla's like, no, you need more. I'm like, oh.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So,
oh gosh.
Will you be going to NCA in November? Are you going to any conferences?
I'm not an NCA. It's where is it this year? It's
Dallas, Fort Worth.
Yeah. I can't keep getting off of work for stuff. I've been traveling a little bit on my other job, so I can't get off, unfortunately. But I may do some of the regional. I may do, I think it's in Boston here, the Northeast one. So I may,
Yeah.
I may attend that.
Okay, good.
So, all right, guys, I don't want to eat up too much of your night. We're praying for you, and we're thinking of you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night. Happy studying.
Right. Thank you.
Happy studying. Happy.
Woohoo! Yes.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
If I just didn't sign that honor code to not drink.
I know. Some wine would definitely make this easier.
The drinking is looking better right now. Much better. I need to sign an honor code to not Netflix is what I need to sign.
That's funny. So how are you? I haven't seen you in a while, Christy. How do you feel you're coming?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. The 2 Monday nights ago, I just, I can't remember if I wasn't feeling well but last Monday night, I completely forgot. We started school last week and it just slipped my mind. I didn't remember till 9 o'clock that night. I should have set it on my phone, but I didn't. So, it's fine. I've been getting up. I don't have classes till about 10:50. So I've been getting up about 7 and doing 2 hours in the morning.
Well, nice.
Yeah, which is nice and concentrated, and then try to go to work and be, so it's hard to be focused on work if you're really thinking about that. So if I can get that out of the way, but I am using a lot of it in my classes just so I can repeat it to myself.
Right.
Like I'm teaching comm research, and so I'm using the history of communication as a setup to that, which is really helpful. Or a lot of theories and public relations case studies that the book doesn't necessarily bring in. So it's been an interesting process for sure. But I feel like I know.
How are you doing integrating the course materials, other courses, outside sources, and your own experience?
Well, I teach. I haven't done a lot of writing though, Mary. That's my one thing is I've done a lot of research. I mean, I've written small things, but because I teach a broad section of content, I have a pretty good repertoire of stuff. I mean, I could probably hold a conversation for 2 hours on a topic.
Okay,
talk
about theology and art.
Okay, just as a general idea.
No.
Well, I mean, okay, yeah, and the courses I teach. So, well, one of the courses I teach is advertising design, which integrates science, which is what we know, and then also integrates art, which is the graphics component, and historically the graphics component of that. But the other part of it that we don't often integrate is the spiritual component. And so one of the ways that I teach my design course is to talk about the creative process. And so the creative process itself then goes to not just the physical process of creative, but the spiritual process. And to do that, you really have to remove yourself from the idea and incubate. And like Marcel Gabriel would call that secondary reflection, where you go to a different place to reflect he would call it metaphysical, but and it wouldn't necessarily have to be Christian, although he was. But you would basically get outside of yourself to really think about the creative process outside of the physical doing. And so he enjoyed it from a dramatist standpoint. He worked through his philosophy in drama. He also found that at the core of his philosophy was classical music. And that classical music really took him to a place, that secondary reflection place. So I mean, I can think about
how would you
art
tie
as
the books and the authors that you read in the theology class.
Okay, well, I'll have to think through that one. That would be one. I was trying to think specifically. I would think about C.S. Lewis, of course, that talks about the creativity and mysticism and the jumping off of the rational for the irrational. Should I say it that way?
Anyone else can help her. This is just not putting Christy on the spot.
Yeah,
putting all.
But I'm thinking that C.S. Lewis is one of those who looks at taking that the idea of mysticism and as the jumping off point. So that would be, I think I probably would bring that in. I probably need to work on defining that and what that looks like. I was trying to think of the other theology.
Sayer in your class? Did he make?
No, we didn't read her. We didn't read her. No, we read Connor. I'm trying to think. I mean, a number of those. Craddock and Kierkegaard, of course. And I was trying to think Augustine. Now,
because anytime
thinking about
you combine in this program, anytime you combine art, communication, and theology, you should automatically think Dorothy Sayer. That's why I asked that.
Yeah, I don't know. We didn't. I haven't read her at all. But
Who is Dorothy Sayer?
I'm sorry, Flora?
Who is Dorothy Sayer?
He may have pulled it for your cohort. He used to teach it in theology. Fraser used to teach it in theology. It's a book called Letters to a Diminished Church. She was one of the Inklings. And she wrote about how Christianity really was missing a creative aesthetic. We really needed to be more creative and incorporate art and
she talked about
culture.
How like to reach, especially like I think from what I remember, to reach like people today, we need to do it from the perspective of the artist, to bring that back.
But if you didn't have her, then your mind wouldn't automatically go there.
Yeah.
I also think with Flannery O'Connor and art, because she's in the grotesque, and so you could talk about how with art, sometimes the purpose behind the art is to force our eyes to view something in an abnormal way, especially just abstract art or something. And Flannery O'Connor did that with our minds. Through her narratives is, she forced us to approach those thoughts in such a different way that it like shakes you to your core, and you're like, why am I reading a story about everyone that gets shot and killed, dies, and how in the world is this going to benefit my life? But I think she just had that shock factor, and I could see tying that into art and into waking us up, like Kierkegaard making the strange.
Let's talk a little bit about indirect communication. How could you tie indirect communication into theology and art?
The use of stories to communicate a point or the gospel, and it's the use of imagination. Some of the stories are not directly preaching the gospel. It's a story told in a different format, and also all the symbolisms in the story, like Flannery O'Connor's story. Some of the names have meaning, and some of the actions, like what was it that story on the grandmother, and the thief who killed everybody. When she touched his shoulder, I think it was, and he jumped back, something like that. It was like a point of revelation. So all these are little stories and symbolisms that told a story, and it was an indirect communication, not the direct preaching way.
Right. I think it was Kierkegaard that said, there's a time for direct communication and a time for indirect. And direct is when, you have to explain something that someone has never heard of. They don't have any concept about it at all. So we have to be direct. But indirect is when people have become so familiar with the concept that they no longer react to it or respond to it. And so then you have to indirectly engage with them so that it's like hearing it for the first time again, sort of like with Chesterton's example of thinking he arrived at a new island when he really just came back to England, and having that, all of those emotions that went with that. But then also Craddock in Indirect Comm, he talked about in his book, Overhearing the Gospel, how if indirectly you don't give them the answer and you leave them with something that they have to chew on, and then let that fall into who they are, and then they have to process that on their own, then they're going to come to this conclusion really through the Holy Spirit. Similar to what Peters would say in Speaking into the Air. And, and then they also talked about coming up alongside of another person and walking with them where they're at, instead of expecting them to come to you, and then receiving, but going to where they're at. So those are sort of some of the things I would tie in.
I was thinking about
let's
Penner.
talk about the concept of worship what you love, which is what Smith and Augustine basically say. So if you worship what you love, how can you communicate to this generation?
I don't clarify
the question
that.
is if
To millennials,
if you worship what you love, if the assertion that Smith and Augustine make is that you worship what you love, if that is true, then how can we communicate to this current generation? Okay, let me ask you another question. How many of you get up in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom, and check your email or your Facebook accounts?
in real time, all the time. Yes, all the time.
Is that not a form of liturgy?
Who is it that talks about liturgy? Smith? Is that Desiring the Kingdom? No.
Smith?
Is that correct?
Mary, how do you see that as liturgy?
Because
it's like going to the mall. It's like that example about the mall.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. When you're doing something consistently, it's the first thing you think of, and it's become a habit. It's a secular liturgy. The fact that we panic when we leave our cell phone somewhere, we're worshiping that. We're worshiping that need to be connected, whether it's connected through a cell phone, whether it's connected through social media, whether it's connected through email. It is a form of liturgy. It's a form of worship.
What is that,
Just
Smith?
like the Super Bowl is a form of worship.
Mary.
There are people I know that every year for the Super Bowl, they plan their parties.
Yeah.
It's a form of liturgy. It's a form of worship. And there's a lot of secular examples like that. So when Smith and Augustine say we worship what we love, people love their cell phones. People love the Super Bowl. People love the eclipse. People love whatever, that they're really devoting that kind of time, attention, and ritualistic behavior to.
I mean, it's like as a church, to sort of look at it from like media and the church perspective, is you've got to be, willing to incorporate stuff that's reaching different generations, and the digital generation, and including digital landscapes in your ministry is important, because if we are worshiping our phones, then our phones needs to be a place where they can have the opportunity to connect to Christ, and you're making it available. They might not go to a small group at a church building, but they might be willing to attend a small group that they can pull up on an app that they've downloaded on their phone, and we're so autonomous that they might be more willing to connect to people that they don't know on a digital small group platform versus going and connecting to people they do know at a church. So, I mean, I think it's about being willing to embrace the generation, where they're at, and find ways to connect to those digital natives.
Exactly. Because if you think about it, their method of communication is not the method that I grew up with.
Well, no,
I have to learn their method of communication in order to effectively reach them.
Well, they discriminate. And I say that not in a racial way, but they discriminate in a way they're critical. And so I'm thinking millennials. You say generation, I'm thinking millennials, 1834s. They are highly critical. And so what Penner said was that we can't use apologetics. That doesn't work in this generation. We have to use witness. And our witness is the way that we live our lives. And then be able to create community that then draws out the opportunities for communication and discourse. But outside of that, we can't. I think a lot of times what we end up doing is trying to prove, Christ, as opposed to living a Christian witness, which is much more powerful as a testimony because it's a day in, day out. It's not a memorized idea, but it's an internalized idea.
Well, if you
what kind of theory could you apply to answering that question?
Well,
Using the information you just gave me, Christy C and Christy K.
Yeah.
Come up with a theory that you could use in that answer.
The cultural tradition, postmodernism, because, well, I know a lot of postmodernism is something I've looked at with my zombie essay, and just how the postmodern generation, the millennials, they have such a lack of trust in any governmental institution. The trust has been broken down. It's been reflective in zombie narrative. And so,
Christy C, what would you do?
Well, I was trying to think of a couple. I thought phenomenological approach, I think, is that lived experience, which is more, but without a theory kind of focus on that. I would think elaboration likelihood model, where it's central and then peripheral roots to the message. So central would be reason, cognitive, and then peripheral would be this experiential approach.
Okay, how could you pull in history of comm with your answer?
Oh, Mary, you're killing me here. History of comm. How can you communicate to the current generation?
Think of which Fang revolution you're in, and how could you pull history of comm in?
Well, I mean, I think you could talk about how with each transition of the different revolutions that we've had to communicate in different ways. For example, going from, literate to print, and now the Bible being available to people, churches had to realize, well, we can't do things how we've always done them because people have the word in their hand. And
available in emoticon.
Yeah. And so with every transition, the church has to be willing to, reassess what those new mediums, how it changes the way we communicate, how we gather information, how we get questions answered, how we put out information, and all of that. And so you could
take it broader than that. You could talk about how the communication changes the culture and the culture changes the communication. I think the example we gave the other night when John was on was Google. Google's a great example. Facebook's a great example of how the method of communication has changed the way we actually live our lives.
Well, now you're talking all media ecology. That brings in philosophy and Postman and McLuhan and
exactly,
all of them, and media ecology theories, and
Because I was thinking also like the medium is a message, because when you're talking about digital landscape.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. You can bring all of that stuff in. So all of that stuff could come in to your theology question in an answer. The more you write, the less they're going to ask if you do it well. Okay?
Right.
Christy C., what electives have you been told that you're going to be tested on?
Well, I haven't, but I'm thinking I was going to talk to Dr. Keeler tomorrow. Peace journalism, social media and internet marketing, academic writing.
Did you not get an email?
I have not received an email.
Okay.
And communication ethics.
Okay.
So that was with Dr. Land.
Ethics was with Land?
Yeah. Dean Land, and then academic writing with Dr. Perry.
Right.
Social media and internet marketing with Dr. Keeler, and peace journalism with Dr. Perry.
Okay. Social media and internet marketing.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is you're probably going to have to come up with some type of a campaign.
Yeah.
For that one.
And that was, it was heavy stress social media, which and I teach, of course, I teach media planning. So, and I have my students do Google Analytics certification and AdWords certifications and stuff. So
what I would advise you to do is brush up on the latest trends in social media so that you can
Okay.
bring up something that he's never even heard of.
Okay, good. I'll do
That'll
that.
tickle his toenails. Another thing you
Okay,
can do
good.
is go into Google Scholar and come up
Mhm.
with papers that were written in 2017 on the
Okay.
impact of social media on the church, on society, on whatever. You could also do Pew Research and come up with some statistics that would add a little weight to your arguments. Because basically, what you're doing in these exams is you're creating a persuasive speech
Mhm.
or a persuasive argument.
One of my big
So you
things
want to
now
do the
that
two-sided refutational
yeah,
argument.
okay, weighted. So in social media, one of my biggest things now is the amount now that we've all jumped into it, is how much it's influencing our communication, our interpersonal communication, and how much more critical we are behind the wall. So I need to probably find some research that specifically talks about criticisms and dark social media, which I think is another area which people, it's easy to be critical when nobody knows it's you.
Like Tor,
What do you mean by that?
the dark social media. Is that part of the Tor network?
No, not so like
What's that like Shadab or she
yeah. So where you don't have a your online profile is hidden. So there was an app that like at universities where it was only within a 3 or 4 mile radius of the university, and it would be just for that campus. And you basically go on and create a profile, but you're unknown to anybody, and you can post anything about anyone. But what was
stuff like that he may not know about, he would love. The professors love hearing new things. So if you could provide them with new information that they're not aware of, anything in 2017, they're probably not that on top of at the moment. Just because their 2017 has been somewhat chaotic, as you guys know, for the first 8 months. So it'd be very easy to throw in up-to-date new stuff for them. Academic writing, what I would do is, do you know what your dissertation topic is yet, Christy?
I do. I think so. It's going to be the a narrative theme analysis, a rhetorical analysis of I say that maybe of Oral Roberts' 1950-556 sermons, where he was preaching integration of the races, but it wasn't making.
You better know fantasy theme analysis really well when you go into orals. Because Perry has used fantasy theme analysis. He did a paper on Fred Rogers.
Yeah, I've read that twice.
Okay, make sure you're familiar with that paper so that you can quote it when you discuss fantasy theme analysis.
Okay. And then the other part of that is gatekeeper theory on who was keeping the messages from going to broadcast. So I have a pretty good background on gatekeeper theory. So.
Okay, also you're going to want to take a look at, anyone with academic writing or dissertation work is going to want to look at journals that you might be submitting a paper to, because I guarantee you with an academic writing question, Perry's probably going to have you come up with a paper either related to your dissertation or related to some work that you've done in one of his classes, and have you submit it to a journal. So you're going to want to know 2 or 3 journals that you could submit it to, and why you could submit it or why you shouldn't submit it to that journal and submit it to this.
Pros and cons.
So go online and pull a couple of those names.
The peace journalism one is the one that Dr. Perry, I mean, that's, I think Myrna, of course, Myrna and Chris and I were a team on that, but that's the one where we created a new typology for dramatic television. Basically a good.
Yeah, and he may direct the question right to that.
And it's,
so make sure you're very familiar with your work.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. And his work. That's the.
Yeah. And with peace journalism, he might even take it further and ask you, if once that was published, if you were to elaborate on that, how would you go about doing that, or how should that model be used in a different context, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But do you see what I mean when you've got to integrate things? We just did a little bit of theology tonight. That's what you need to be able to do at this point. You need to be able to have me throw out a theme in a class. If I were to throw out phenomenology, you guys need to be able to pull in almost every single class you've taken in that answer. You don't have to on the test, you don't do them all, but you need to have that ability. You can come up with, if I were to say imagination, you could bring in C.S. Lewis, you could bring in entertainment education, you could bring in academic writing, you could bring in theology, you could bring in history of comm. I mean, I could bring in all of those with just that one term. And that's what you need to be able to do, is know the main key terms in each of these classes and be able to associate things in other classes with them, personal experiences with them, integrate everything together in one beautiful little package.
Okay. John just sent a text. He says sorry, he cannot make it. He says hello.
Hello, John.
Okay.
John Powers.
Now, my question to you is, was that enough for you, or do you want me to take it further?
Huh? Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to all three of you.
Okay. I spoke to Dr. Brown today, and he told me how he's going to ask the theory question.
Ooh, do tell.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking for my notes. Now he gave me this. He said that he's going to ask the way Dr. Fraser asks the question. If all of it, did all of you take it under Dr. Fraser?
Yes.
Yes.
That's because he's probably going to get the question from Dr. Fraser the Thursday before when they're writing together.
Anyway, he talked about the 7 traditions. So this one is quite straightforward. He said the 7 traditions, you need to know like a couple of theories under every tradition. And then you do need to know a little bit about the field and discipline, communication as a field or a discipline.
Okay.
So, and then he highlighted that Little John book would tell you about all the 7 traditions.
Yeah.
So, and he gave me also this journal article. I have it as a hard copy.
1999, Robert Craig.
No, this is Catherine McGuire. The title of this is called Making Sense of the 7 Communication Traditions.
Okay. Could you do me a favor and send that to Christy and have Christy put that in the accompanying articles file?
That might have been one that was linked in our class, but I don't remember.
It may be.
But Flora, you're talking about 7 traditions, and isn't that that's advanced comm theory, right?
Yes, this is a theory class. He's the one asking the question.
Okay, all right. For some reason I thought you said theology. Okay, gotcha.
No. The theology question
is pretty straightforward. The only difference is with Dr. Fraser's questions, he had a secondary and third
scenario
set in his question. So he would throw people off by putting it in a scenario like at NCA. If you had to speak on a panel at NCA, how would you explain to someone blah, blah, blah?
Filter it somehow.
Yeah. So what you need to know is the best way to handle the advanced comm theory question is to start off with Craig. Just get it out of the way. Because if you don't define whether communication is a field or a discipline, they will ask you in orals what your definition of communication is.
No, I dread that question.
Okay. And I learned that from Ramika Leary, because Ramika said she learned that from, I think it was Tiffany Urich. She said Tiffany told her that because she didn't put that in, they asked her to define communication. A lot of people got that question, to define communication.
How would you define
I took a cue from Ramika, and I did it right off the bat, and that's how I introduced the 7 traditions. And I integrated both textbooks that we had in discussing the 7 traditions. Now, if he's using a Fraser-like approach, after you do that, you're going to need to weed out what else he wants. Because sometimes Fraser had people do textbooks. Sometimes Fraser had people do essays. But all of it was the basic information and then something else. I think the last time, I think with us it was transcendent
Truth.
transcendent truth. That was what he was writing about at the time. So our group got the term transcendent truth, and we had to talk about it. I think in February, oh, what did they get? Rebuilding theory or something? I don't remember. But Fraser was like that. He always threw something extra in there. So what I would suggest to you is know your 7 traditions, know 2 or 3 theories in each of the traditions, intro your essay like you would any essay, do your thesis statement, and then start off with Craig, do your traditions, and then answer whatever else he gives you. Because a lot of people have gotten thrown off with that scenario or with that secondary concept and have just answered that secondary concept, integrating a few of the traditions. So don't let that throw you.
Okay. I just briefly look at the article that he gave me, that making sense of the 7 communication traditions. Basically, it's talking about the 7 traditions and the thing about feel or discipline. So I think that's
exactly
the direction of what he wants. So this article, I think, helps us to focus.
Well, and that's why I'm saying I would start off with defining it as a field or a discipline before you even go any further. I did it right in my thesis statement. I talked my first paragraph. I think it's in the Dropbox. I did it right as my thesis, part of my thesis statement, because I didn't want to have to deal with that in orals. I really tried to mitigate what I would have to deal with in orals.
Okay,
so you can use that, Flora, that article, but also include Craig's 1999 article, which is in the accompanying articles folder in Dropbox.
That
because
one
you're
might
going
be
right
in
to the
Dropbox.
source.
I'm going to try to find that article
Also,
because
take
I've
a look
seen
too.
it.
There's been some word out there about a possible 8th tradition, so you may want to try and discuss that as well, or the future of a possible 8th tradition. Like I said, they like new stuff.
Who says that's the 8th tradition?
There's been talk in the industry about a potential 8th tradition.
So how do we find that? Is that Little John
it's
thing?
Called Google. We just talked about Google.
Okay. Okay, then the other thing he mentioned, the theology question, it will be taken from his course, Dr. Fraser's course content, from some past exam question, that kind of style expectation. But the answer will be reviewed as a committee. That means I think all 3 of them would read our answer.
That's not surprising at all, because Dr. Keeler and Dr. Brown are incredibly familiar with Dr. Fraser's method of testing and his answers. If you think about it, the 3 of them together have probably done at least 20 to 30 of these processes over their working time together. They're very familiar with the way he tests. So study it as if Fraser was giving it.
I'm hoping that means they'll pull one of his previous questions and run with it.
Well, he's either going to use a previous question, or like I said, he and Dr. Brown, Fraser and Dr. Brown, have a business together. They write together every Thursday. I dare say they're probably together a couple times a week. So I have no doubt, if they don't pull it from the pool of questions, that he could very easily get one from Fraser.
Yeah. Right. Hey, Flora.
Yes.
What journal is that making sense of the 7 traditions? And like I'm trying to find it in the library.
It says Communication Teacher, Volume 20, number 4, October 2006.
And it's called, what's the title of it again?
Making Sense of the 7 Communication Traditions.
Okay.
What I can do is tomorrow I just go and scan it. I don't know where he got this from, but I can scan it and email it to you. If it's not in the library, then then
Christy, make sure it's not in the Dropbox already.
I looked in the program in the class for that one. I didn't see it, but I've seen this somewhere.
I have too. That sounds very familiar. I'm surprised it's not in the accompanying articles folder.
But this paper was presented at NCA.
Okay.
Yeah. It says here it was presented
So
at
Christy
Okay,
and
it
Sarah,
is.
how do you feel about the exam? How do you feel where you are in your abilities?
I'm becoming less confident every day. I mean, I told Christy I was getting up and studying 2 hours in the morning, but I haven't really started writing. I've just been trying to synthesize, and so I need to start. I think I need to start writing more.
Okay.
Just so y'all know, that is in the library database. Just put it.
Okay.
Put the whole title in, and you'll find it. And the PDF's right there. It's 5 pages long.
Okay.
So
yeah. Oh, before I forget, he also mentioned the ontological, epistemological, the exological, all these things when he was talking about theory. So,
so know those 3 terms.
Yeah, I think know the terms. I forgot how he.
Those terms are actually listed in Dropbox as well.
Yeah, they are.
Epistemology, all the different terms actually.
And axiology. Okay.
Yeah, but I forgot how he linked it with theory. I forgot what he said. So because it's 2 hours exam, he is expecting at least 4 to 5 pages.
That's pretty common.
Mm-hmm.
And those are single space pages, Flora.
Mm-hmm.
I just got 3 hours ago. I got my email from Dr. Keeler. So so he told me exactly. He told me that Dr. Brown is developing the 2-hour question for Dean Land's communication ethics course. So.
Oh no!
And then it says I'll develop a question that reflects social media and internet marketing, and then one from your dissertation research. So I feel better about day 2 than I do day 1 probably. But so that
I will tell you, several of us talked about our exam afterwards, and the electives were actually kind of fun to answer because you could be creative. You weren't as restricted by information you had to memorize.
Right. Yeah.
It was more based on your abilities to
apply it.
And yeah, exactly. So you will, if you were like us, you will enjoy day 2 more than you will day 1.
Right.
Christy, your dissertation question, did you get it as a 2-hour question or a 4-hour question?
This is a 4-hour question because I have peace journalism, comm ethics, social media, and then the dissertation research. Those are day two.
So they merged a different set for you. And Dr. Brown is asking that question?
No, Dr. Keeler is, because he's the one who's overseeing my dissertation research.
Okay, then that's fine. Because my 4-hour question, they merged a whole series of it. But when I talked to Dr. Brown, I realized that they have a different understanding of one of the courses I took. Because they merged the legal and human rights implications with terrorism in theory. But the legal and human rights implication was more on, it's a law class, so it had a different slant. And when I talked to him, I realized he realized also that he was asking for something else. So if Dr. Keeler is the one who's asking your question, I think that's fine. He took it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
He specifically said on the social media and internet marketing course, he says it probably will have a college curriculum pedagogy aspect to it.
So basically,
nice.
Something you do every semester.
Yes, I love that. And I actually, rebuilt the social media management course last summer. So that makes it a little bit easier.
Just remember, too, when you're doing your electives, even though you may get into them and get involved in them, as far as the fun, creative aspect of them, don't forget to throw in your theory. Don't forget to throw in references to theology, to history of to your other courses. I mean, even something as simple as putting in the fact that as an innovation, social media diffused through society rather quickly. That's a reference to theory.
Yeah.
Okay. So even though you may be enjoying it and you're getting into it, don't forget to put in those elements that show them that you know how to talk about this stuff in a fun context as well as in a core context.
What do I do about this class that Dean Land taught that basically was his edited, he served as the editor of the textbook that had his theory model, his ethics model, but I don't think Dr. Brown has taught that class.
No.
And he's the one who's writing the question.
Right, but he's tested with Dr. Land multiple times.
Oh, okay.
So he's familiar with how Dean Land tested. He's familiar with how he questioned. Just know that model, know that stuff.
Okay.
You might want to look at, I think Alani Hill had an ethics question last time around.
Yeah, I had her in that class. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, her ethics question. Take a look at it. Don't be scared by it, but take a look at it.
Okay. Yeah, that's the one
to Alani if you need any help. Feel free to reach out to her. The one thing that I've told the last two groups, including my group, was that the price for this service is that you pay it back to future test takers. So feel free to call on any of us. Annette wasn't kidding. We're there for you guys. We're there to help you get through this, and we want you to pass as much as other people wanted us to pass.
Yeah. I want to pass too.
Oh, Christy, the 4-hour focus question, 10 pages.
Yeah, it can be lengthy. What I would suggest to all of you is, as of tomorrow, you have 30 days left. So you will be on the day count instead of the week count. Take your remaining time. Find the problems in your studying. Find the problems in the courses. Whatever your weakest areas are, devote more time to them. If you need help, reach out for it. If you have questions, reach out. Make sure when you go into that exam, you know what you're going in to be tested on. Okay, now is not the time to bring new things in. Just like Annette said, the day of the exam, I actually found a quote for one of my classes in stuff I was studying. But that quote, I did not learn. I couldn't even tell you what it is right now. All I did was put it in my head and data dump it as soon as I was given the okay to use the computer. Okay, so don't do in-depth learning new things at this point. Hone the stuff that you already know. Know it well. So if your favorite theory is ELM, if your favorite theory is attachment theory, if your favorite theory is nonverbal communication or social learning theory or whatever it is, make sure you know it. If your favorite theological writer is Augustine, make sure you know it. Know the other ones too. But see, they're looking to find out what your areas of interest in, what your specialties are. So moving forward, you can talk to someone about your topic and have all of these informational topics in the background. You can talk about zombies, Christy, and you can talk about the history of them. You could talk about what theories apply to them. You could talk about the theology associated with them as far as the church's take on zombies. You could talk about social media in the church. You could talk about how you would get a paper on zombies academically published. So all of these things really do tie together. Just work on that integration at this point. Work on pulling things together so that if I were to give you a topic such as spin or such as media ecology, you could pull up other classes and talk about it effectively.
Yeah.
Can I dress like a zombie?
Yes. Yes, you can.
Can you what?
Just kidding. Can I dress like a zombie on that day?
I'm gonna look like a
Yes, you
zombie.
can. You can wear anything you want.
you-
On your written exams, you can wear baggy jeans and a t-shirt. On your oral exams, you are to dress to the nines. You are to dress professionally.
I might be dressed professionally, but I'm gonna look like a zombie because my eyes are gonna be red, and under my eyes is gonna be black.
Oh my
because
goodness.
I'm gonna be so tired. I'm gonna be
You
like,
have no idea.
we'd be like, what? Why? What?
Yeah, you will. You will be exhausted. By the time this thing is over, you will be exhausted. But take heart, because the night after writtens and the night after orals, those 2 nights will be the 2 best nights of sleep in your entire life.
Yeah, it's gonna be called NyQuil.
You won't need NyQuil, honey.
I'm gonna be like,
You will be
gosh.
out.
when Annette was talking, I was like, oh no, I'm sleeping the night in between because as soon as I eat dinner, I'm going to take a shot of NyQuil and go to bed. So I can
don't sleep through
sleep.
the next day.
Oh, I won't.
Do we know who all is? I mean, Myrna, I haven't seen Myrna. I didn't know if some people are still. April, I know, was on before, and Beryl. And do we know who all's taking them for sure?
Beryl might change her mind.
Well, you have to
Okay.
understand something too. Not every
Hey, let
participates
me
in a study
interrupt real
group.
quick.
And
My
the people that don't
Mary,
take it
let me-
seriously don't pass.
Hey, Mary.
Oh yeah, right.
You guys, I'm going to hop off for a few minutes because my daughter's upset about something and I'm going to go snuggle her. So y'all keep
Okay.
talking.
Thank you, Chris.
Oh, like
I'll keep
that's
it going.
an excuse.
While she's crying about something.
Okay, go.
So if y'all are still back when I pop back on, then okay. But if not, y'all have a good night, okay?
Do we know if Linda Hernandez is taking them? Linda Hernandez.
As far as I know, she is, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, and Beryl's maybe changing your idea, changing.
Beryl's in the United States.
Yeah, I saw her today. So, she's still studying for the exams, but because of finances, she might take next semester as a leave off and do it in the spring. So depending on that situation, when is it going to be resolved, she might take it in the fall, but if it doesn't turn up, she'll just take it in the spring. But meanwhile, she's still studying for it.
Okay, and then John Powers, I know, is taking him, right?
Uh-huh.
So do you guys have any other questions for me or need anything else from me?
No, Mary, but thanks for the hard questions.
Hey, just trying to do my best.
I know. I'm going to remember that for when I do that to other people.
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna-
mean, you should be able to pull up a theme in the class and be able to associate with it on other levels. So,
Oh, that'll be good. That's really good.
you guys did good. Just keep it up. You've got 30 days.
How would you advise for the dissertation question? Because they push it as a 4-hour thing.
It's not a 4-hour thing.
It's a 4-hour question, 4-hour focus. So that
There
means
is no 4-hour question, Flora. So if it's 4 hours, they've combined it with something else.
yes. So the dissertation, like for mine, I think Christy, the C is saying the same thing too, right? My mine is terrorism and communication with theory, legal, human rights implications,
Right.
with a 4-hour focus.
Yeah, so they've combined two for you. So I would treat them as separate studies, but try to integrate them is what I would do.
Yes.
They're going to be
because
looking for you to
it's
add
gonna
on to
dovetail.
that. They're not just looking for you to write a dissertation. They're
Yeah.
looking for you to write additional papers. How rich is this vein of research? What other ideas can you come up with that are going to complement it? Why do this research to begin with? You're basically, it sounds to me like they're having you write a proposal of some type.
When I spoke to him, he phrased the question as like, how is media being used by the terrorists? What are the policy implications? Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that one
So
can
the
take a lot of
integration,
angles.
Well, you did a study on that,
But
right? Right? You did. I mean, didn't you do a quantitative study?
I mean, there's some things that is fine, but there were some things like he's referring to in our conversation. He later realized that he's asking for ethical implications, not the legal and human rights implications, which I studied in the law school, it was a little bit different.
Well, he's gonna if he's doing a question that's supposedly that long, you're gonna have to bring in other classes. If you took ethics, you're gonna have to bring in ethics.
Yeah, I agree.
You're
I
gonna
think
have
that's
to bring in theology, history of the history of terrorism, the history of psychology of terrorism, or whatever. You're gonna have to bring all that stuff in. It's not gonna be a straightforward yes/no question.
And
Sounds
some of
very open-ended to me. So you're gonna have to cover your bases there, Miss Flora.
So some of the things that he was talking about, is actually I need to do some research on it. Actually, it's new things because we didn't cover it in those classes. So, yeah.
all right. I'm gonna go throw myself on a needle. That'll be better
Nope, don't
than
do that. You're gonna be
30
just fine.
days.
If you need anything, let me know.
All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
Okay, God bless.
See you next week. Bye. Bye, Flora.
Bye. Okay.
So Flora, I would take a look at whatever information he sent you about that question. And that's exactly what he's going to test you on. And I would examine it every way you possibly can. I would go back through the textbook that you had for that class if he assigned any books for you to read.
No, he didn't take me for those classes.
If global journalism, if you had that, if you could bring that in, if you had peace journalism and could bring that in. I mean, I would include everything. If you did crisis comm, you could bring that in.
Okay.
So just take a look. Did he responded to you in writing, correct?
No, I was in office today, so I spoke to like Perry on his question that he's going to ask. I spoke to Dr. Brown on his question that he's going to ask. So that was easier that way because whoever is asking the question is the one
right.
who has something in mind. So the rest
Well,
were
I
pretty
would take what Dr.
straightforward.
Perry said to you when you spoke to him, and understand that whatever he said is what you need to be studying specifically. But I would also expand on it because they can ask you anything they want when it comes down to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't just think because you know your dissertation topic that you know. Don't just assume that you know everything about it, because Dr. Perry may be able to find something that you have missed. So make sure you know everything that you need to know for this question. If you've done an annotated bibliography for your dissertation, or you've done dissertation research with Dr. Perry, go back over it. Make sure you're really familiar with it. Make sure you're familiar with potential outlets for taking this further, or potential implications for society. But I would definitely work on that one.
I did a dissertation proposal with Dr. Brown.
You did dissertation proposal with who?
Dr. Brown.
Oh, okay. So I thought it was Perry. I'm sorry.
But Perry did some other units, some other aspect of terrorism. So
well, then that's going to complicate things because you have two different people,
right,
and one question. So I mean, you're really going to have to work at that one. You're going to have to do what Brown needs you to do and do what Perry needs you to do.
But the question is asked by Dr. Brown, not Dr. Perry. So.
Okay. Well, then Brown is very straightforward in his testing. He's not looking to trip you up. He's looking to find out what you know. So take what Dr. Brown had to say to heart and follow that guideline.
Mm-hmm.
My suggestion is just try and take it one step further, because he's probably not very familiar with the topic. And like I said before, they have not had a whole lot of spare time to pursue other topics outside of just keeping their head above the water. You know that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was thinking that based on what he told me today, like I try to phrase out the question as detailed as possible, and I'm going to ask him, like, is this what you're asking? Is this the right direction?
He's not going to tell you that that's what he's asking. He will not tell you that. He will tell you what you should study. but he's not going to tell you, he's not going to answer that question.
Okay, so rephrase it. This is what I'm going to cover. Is this good enough?
No, that's not what you need to ask either. You need to ask him, if you were taking this test and you had 3 weeks to study, what areas would you focus on? Questions like that.
So he told me today was how the media is being used by the terrorists, what are the policy implications, and the example of Apple he talked about.
Okay.
So he did talk about that.
Then you're going to want to study those things.
Yeah, which was like in the process of it, it's like Apple cases, I didn't cover it in my law classes because we were covering a different whole set. So there was this whole clarification that went back and forth because he wasn't familiar with what I covered. And
well, you're gonna want to expand on it too.
And then what I covered was habeas corpus, and he said that's not what he wants. So
well, I don't know what to tell you then, Miss Flora.
So that was like, okay, great. So they want to test me on this, but he's not familiar with it, and he had a different idea of what I went through. So that was where it was a little bit complicating.
It is, but the thing about that as well is you will find that these professors are going to show you mercy and grace, especially in this first round since Dr. Frazier's left. Because of that. So I would just make sure you know everything that he told you today that you need to know. If possible, you add to it in some way that he didn't mention.
Okay.
They want you to pass. Well, kiddo, I have to skedoodle. But if there's anything else I can help you with, let me know.
Okay. Take care.
Bye. You have a good night, Miss Flora.
Bye.
Bye, honey.